Hello and welcome. I'm Peter Baldaya, Director of Curatorial Affairs for the Huntsville Museum of Art. And I'm here today with my colleague, David Reyes, Curator of Exhibitions and Collections for the museum. We're very pleased to be hosting the museum's third artist studio visit, virtual studio visit, in connection with the exhibition About Face, Portraits from the Collection, which is currently on view at the museum through November 29th, 2020. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Our guest today is featured artist Aron Belka of New Orleans, Louisiana. Now, some of you will remember that his portrait of Clifton Faust was recently featured in our Red Clay Survey exhibition of contemporary Southern art. Well, we liked that painting so much that we recently bought it for our permanent collection, and it is now prominently featured in About Face. Before we begin, I want to give a quick thank you to the sponsors of this exhibition, the Alabama State Council on the Arts and the Huntsville Museum of Art Guild. And I also want to, again, remind everybody that during the course of the program, you can use the Q&A button on your screen to type in any questions as we proceed. We'll want to get to some of them towards the end of the session. And now I'll hand over the program to David Reyes, who will introduce today's artist, Aron Belka.
Thank you, Peter, and good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce Aron Belka. Aron is a respected regional contemporary artist who lives and works in New Orleans. Belka's paintings have been included in the past two Red Clay Survey exhibitions, winning the prestigious Juror's Choice Award in 2017. He's best known for his large format portraits that blend realism with abstraction and are surprisingly intimate despite their scale. Belka was raised in Salt Lake City and earned a BFA degree from Utah State University with a focus on illustration. After graduation, he spent time in Portland, Oregon and Albany, New York before moving to New Orleans 11 years ago, just before Hurricane Katrina devastated the city. Aron has been included in numerous exhibitions throughout the region and nationally, including the prestigious Scope New York. In 2016, Aron completed a commissioned 11 by 14 foot mural of Allen Toussaint that resides in Manhattan. In the spring of 2016, he spent 5 months as an artist in residence at the Joan Mitchell Center in New Orleans and won the People's Choice 2D prize at Art Fields in Lake City, South Carolina. Belka's paintings are in numerous private and public collections, including the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation, as well as recent acquisitions by the Alexandria Museum in Alexandria, Louisiana, and also the Huntsville Museum of Art. We are pleased to have with us today, Aron Belka. Hey, Aron.
Hey, how are you doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to Peter and David and the Huntsville Museum for inviting me to do this and set this up. Really happy to be bringing people virtually into my studio in these times, these crazy times. So so I'm here in my studio in New Orleans. This is where the art magic happens, I guess.
Yeah.
And like David said briefly, I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. Went to Utah State University and got my BFA degree. And then shortly after that, moved to Portland, Oregon. So what I was going to do, I've got a lot of paintings kind of around the studio here, and I wanted to kind of go through with everyone chronologically kind of how I've gone through my style since graduating from Utah State. I think David mentioned I did emphasize in illustration. So when I was in school, I was doing a lot of small work, and it was from life. I was painting from models, was doing some plein air landscape painting, and then eventually when I moved to Portland, I started kind of toying around with more abstract ideas. And eventually, and these were kind of geometric sort of compositions that I was interested in. And eventually, when we moved to Albany, New York, I started looking at satellite imagery and looking at kind of a macro scale of the designs in the earth, which are very geometric depending on what you're looking at. If you're looking at farmland like that. So this first piece I'm going to show you is a piece that was done about 15 years ago. And I'm going to move my computer here so we can see this. I'll move my chair over. So yeah, so like I said, so this was when we moved to Albany. I started painting a little more kind of full time, was submitting to shows around the state of New York, and was really focused on these ideas and this kind of abstract work. And like I said, started looking at satellite imagery, was really interested in that because it kind of reconnected me with the natural world and some representation, even though I was able to kind of toy with it in an abstract way. So the other thing that's obviously hard to see online with the computer is there is quite a bit of texture, because at the time when I was painting in this style, I wasn't using brushes. I was only using palette knives because I was very interested in kind of playing with those textural qualities. So when you get up close to this, there are a lot of kind of square marks and thick marks because of using that palette knife. And I continued doing this style of work. I actually think, just for reference, I think this is actually a satellite image of somewhere in Egypt. I would literally get on Google Maps and just tour the world and kind of look around at different designs and then use those as references. And then obviously kind of interpret it in my way and change some things and push abstract ideas by using that satellite reference. So this was my style for many years, up until we moved to New Orleans, which was in 2004. And we moved to New Orleans. My spouse applied for graduate school in New Orleans, so that's what brought us down here from Albany, New York. She applied for a master's degree in public health at Tulane. That's what brought us down here. So when we moved down here, I was still doing abstract work, and I don't really consider this something that I don't do anymore. I just haven't really had time to get back to some of these ideas. But this was what I was solely doing in the initial years of being in New Orleans. And in those initial years, I was kind of looking at galleries a little more, trying to figure out professionally which direction I was going, what I was doing. And I ultimately made the decision that I wanted to maybe go back to some representational ideas, obviously because I was interested, but also because I did think that it was, I thought it would maybe propel me into the gallery scene a little easier, because abstracts are kind of hit and miss. So when I decided to do that, like I said, back in school, I was painting very small. And one of the ideas when I decided I did want to go back to representation was I wanted to paint really large. And there were some things that led up to that. Obviously, with the abstract work, I started getting kind of larger and larger as I was doing that, and started really liking painting very large and being more gestural and more space. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of an easy transition when I did decide to do some representational subjects again, that I wanted to go really big. So yeah, so I'm going to move the camera kind of back to where we were. So this piece, this was, so I did get into a gallery, and the first show, my first solo show with that gallery was called Working the Wetlands. And it was, the theme of the show was based loosely on the fishing industry of southern Louisiana. I was very interested in kind of tapping into, when we moved down here, I didn't really leave New Orleans a lot. I hadn't really been anywhere in southern Louisiana. I was very interested in kind of getting to know that culture, and I was interested in like working class subjects, people who are kind of normally passed over, by society. and doing some really large paintings to kind of highlight those folks. So this is a painting of a Vietnamese woman, because there's a very large Vietnamese population in New Orleans that not a lot of people know about, that's very much tied to the fishing industry. And just to give you an idea, I know the mic's not great when I go back, but I'm going to go stand by the painting so you can see how large it is.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that is amazing.
I'm 6'2", so yeah, it's 90 inches tall by 90 inches wide.
Yeah.
And like I said, that first show kind of put me on the map in New Orleans, because a lot of people hadn't really seen really large contemporary portraits like this.
Yeah.
And obviously, the other thing about my style that started happening when I went back to representation was I had been doing all this abstract work. And so a lot of those abstract ideas kind of followed through in these representational subjects that I started painting. Mm-hmm. So like in the backgrounds, you know, I tend to paint very abstractly in the initial stages, and then I'm kind of building up that painting with whatever subject it is. And it just depends on the dialogue with the painting as I'm painting, whether I leave sort of areas that give you windows into the underpainting and those more abstract ideas, or whether, you know, sometimes they get covered up and lost. But yeah, there were several large portraits like this one. This was actually the largest one in the show. And yeah, there were some portraits of some shrimpers. I got to go on a shrimper's boat, this guy Toby. And this next painting that I'm going to show you, because there were also some landscapes in that show of some shrimping vessels. Excuse the jiggle. So yeah, so this was one of the shrimp boat paintings that was in the show. Again, really large painting. It's 6 feet tall. It's 8 feet wide. And you can see, even from far back, you can see the very loose kind of gestural style. And especially down in these areas down here where the water is, that was kind of the initial, that was part of the initial underpainting, which a lot of it I left because I really enjoyed that kind of unfinished look and thought it worked well with translating what looked like water.
Right. Yeah. Having that kind of wet look in the paint. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Are you working primarily from photographs that you took while you were out, sort of meeting people and doing your research?
Yeah. So, like I said, so when I was in school, there was a lot of painting from life, from models, from live models. And yeah, when I started painting really large, I started using photography a lot more as reference material.
Mm-hmm.
And it's my own photography. I actually really enjoy photography as a medium. I happened to be the yearbook photographer in high school, I'm happy to say. But anyway, yeah, so I do use a lot of photographs now. And sometimes I'll do sketches. Sometimes I'll do sketches on site. But for the most part, I'm taking a lot of photographs when I go out and coming back and kind of pouring through a lot of photographs to come up with what a final painting is going to be. And there's a lot of, I'm not, you know, sticking directly to what's in the photograph. There's a lot of changes that get made, obviously, creatively, until I kind of figure out what I want, you know, for the final piece. And I think that, you know, as an artist, I think a lot of artists can relate to this. Like, if you have that, I think you do kind of need that. If you're a traditional painter, you do kind of need that foundation of painting from life before just sort of going and using photographs to paint.
Yes.
You just sort of know the limitations.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of limitations when using photography.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, to answer your question, Peter, yeah, I use a lot of photographs.
And these are oil on canvas, aren't they?
Yeah, I only paint with oils, and that's that's mainly due to my style of painting, which has changed a little bit, a little more recently. But for the most part, like I like to paint wet into wet. I like to paint, be able to go into the paint and you know, move it around and mix into it. And so I can only really do that with oils. And nowadays, and so on a really large piece like this, I'll usually kind of work in sections and maybe for the most part finish the section and then maybe work off the wet edge into the next section. Because it's hard to work a painting this size, you know, and the whole thing kind of stay wet enough to be working in.
Yeah,
So if you're working in sections like that, Aron, are you sketching generally the composition out roughly on the canvas? Do you have like a sort of a foundation, a sort of a drawn foundation to begin with, and then get into it from there?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I mean, the easy answer is I don't have one set method, and often it changes with each painting. There are some paintings where I will actually sketch with paint with a brush. I'll kind of tediously kind of sketch out maybe exactly what's going on in the piece. There are other times where, like I said, I'm painting that abstract background, and as I'm painting the abstract background, I'm kind of blocking in large shapes and mapping things out that way, and then kind of sort of detailing as I go along, you know, into those large shapes. So it just depends on a piece. If it's honestly, a lot of times it's a little of both, because I'm painting sort of gesturally with these abstract backdrops, and I usually am kind of mapping things out in large shapes while I'm doing that, and then with some more specific sort of mapping of where things are, I'll kind of draw into that.
Yep.
And figure it out.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and a lot of times I get questions like if I use a projector, if I grid things, and I don't do any of that. It's just a lot of like, especially with a big piece, there's a lot of kind of going up and stepping back. There's a lot of back and forth. I have a pretty large studio that goes fairly long. So with these big pieces, you know, because when you're up right in front of the piece, as the painter, as the artist, a lot of times it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I have to constantly like go back and look at it and then go up and adjust things, you know. And in the drawing stage, there is a lot of adjustments just to tweak the proportions and get things figured out. And then as I'm painting, I mean, things shift and move when I start painting too. And so I have to kind of constantly be adjusting and doing that as I go along.
So Aron, you were working on the Wetlands series. What did you do after that?
Okay, yeah. So the next big show, I decided I wanted to focus on the horse as a subject. And the reasons for that is because when I was a kid, my dad's an architect, and he's actually a really good draftsman. He's really good at drawing, and he taught me how to draw by drawing the horse and like horse heads. So I drew a lot of horses when I was really young, but then I had never really done any horse subjects in my art since my youth. And the horse is obviously a very historical subject in art, going back to cave paintings, you know, very long time. So this was an idea of mine. I kind of wanted to revisit the horse and kind of do my take on that subject. It just happened that I had a friend who owned a couple racehorses and had invited me to the fairgrounds, which is the racetrack here in New Orleans, to it's actually his dad's horses, to watch his dad's horses race. So while I was there, I was really intrigued by the track and these amazing racehorses, because they're like super athletes. And I was also intrigued by the back end of it, which are a lot of migrant workers that take care of these horses in the stables. Because again, I'm always very focused on kind of this like working class culture and these people that are not really sort of focused on. So I decided to do my show on the racehorse, and there were some paintings of some migrant workers in the stables. So I'm going to pull out a couple paintings, move this. There we go. That in there?
That's perfect.
Mhm,
All right,
yep.
great. So, yeah, so this is one of the larger pieces that was in that show. And like I said, the focus was on these racehorses and jockeys. And I mean, the horse was the star of the show because that was the subject that I was interested in. And I don't have any examples, but like I said, there were some stable scenes, and there were some stable hands that I had also painted that were also in the show. But because it was racehorses, the sort of overlying theme was really about movement. So if you can see in this piece, there's a lot of kind of streaking that's happening, especially you can see in the jockeys.
Yeah.
Because I use a lot of different tools, and we can talk about that maybe a little later, but I don't just use brushes now. I use a lot of different things like squeegees and scrapers and rollers and things. And so I'm always very interested when I am kind of abstracting things. I like to pull paint like from the background into the subject, and from the subject kind of into the background, to kind of what I call kind of fragment things, and it's just one of those abstract elements that I like. So in a lot of these racehorse paintings in this show, there's a lot of that kind of pulling and kind of blurriness going in a very horizontal way to kind of show that movement and that speed, especially in these like racing scenes.
Yeah.
Which there were many of.
Yeah, that's very effective. And Aron, when you're painting a series of works like this and getting ready for a show, and you're working in oil and you're working wet into wet, which takes a while to, cure and so forth, are you working on several pieces at once?
So in the initial stages, I'll have several pieces going. But when I'm getting into the subjects and painting, I'm usually just on one piece.
Okay.
I'm on that piece until it's done. Mainly to your point, because I need to work it while it's wet, so I kind of focus on one piece. And like I said, recently with my last show, which I'll show you, which was a landscape show, I did do a little more of letting things dry and painting on top. So it was a little bit of a different style. And in that most recent show, there was a little more of kind of working on multiple pieces at once. But that was because the style had changed a little bit. So I needed to set pieces aside and let them dry, and then I just go and work on another piece.
Okay.
Which I actually really like, because sometimes when you spend a long time on a piece, you start to question yourself, and so it is good to kind of move around and keep things kind of flowing and keep things fresh.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm going to pull this down and pull out one more example from this show. So yeah, so I really like this painting because it really is just the horse, and it's not even, it's kind of almost a mysterious, kind of elusive piece of the horse. He's actually in a stable. You can't really tell that in the painting because I didn't want it to look like that, but and it also just really focuses on like where all their muscle is, literally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Mhm.
physicality of the animal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like it's basically a figure painting of a horse.
Yes. Yes. Very nice.
And I love the color choices you're using with this, which I think is really interesting about, a lot of your work is the color choices that are made. This is really nice with this kind of gray, faint aspect, kind of ghostly.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, when I was doing the abstract work, it was a lot of warm tones, browns, reds, yellows, oranges. When I started getting back to like these representational subjects, for whatever reason, I don't really know why, but I've really shifted to a more cooler palette. So I don't know if you've noticed as we've gone through it, it's a lot more blues and like greens and just these kind of cooler colors.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I mean, obviously styles change and maybe I'll shift a little bit. Honestly, the landscapes that you'll see in a bit did shift a little bit warmer, but it's still a very cool palette.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, Aron, from here, this is your second solo show at your gallery in New Orleans. What came after that?
Okay, so the next solo show was a museum show, which was at the Marietta Cobb Museum of Art in Marietta, Georgia, which is right outside of Atlanta. And that show, so the painting that you all acquired at the Huntsville Museum of Art, Clifton Faust, was one of the pieces in that show. So Clifton is a New Orleans artist, good friend of mine. And that show was was a body of work of 20 portraits of New Orleans artists. They had reached out to me to do a solo show. We discussed, they were really interested in my portraits, and we had discussed like doing a portrait show. And I was sort of throwing around some ideas and eventually landed on kind of wanting to honestly promote some of my friends and people that I knew, and just thought it'd be really cool to have a show representing some of my peers and colleagues here in New Orleans.
Yep.
So yeah, I'll move this over. We'll see one of those.
And Aron, this portrait series, is every person depicted in the series an artist?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and the way I did it, just like that.
That's good.
Yeah. So the way it's too bad that I was, I chose 20 paintings because each painting is 4 feet by 4 feet, and 20 of those paintings was kind of decided that that's what was going to fit in their museum space in the gallery that they gave me. Honestly, I could have done a lot. There's a lot more artists that I didn't do that honestly, I've kind of decided it may be an ongoing kind of body of work, because I've talked to several friends of mine, artists who I didn't get to do that I would love to paint. So there might be some more, in this series coming out at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so what I've got actually is this self-portrait of me, which was a study that I did for these pieces, and it was basically it's on paper, and it was an attempt to kind of figure out how I wanted to paint these and what colors I wanted to use, and for a second I started to go warm again. I thought all the portraits were actually going to be very like red and use these reds and things like that. And it was a lot of fun to do. This has been hanging on my wall for a while, and for months, like I would actually go up to it and mark it up a little bit, do something to it, and then walk away and work on another painting. So it's actually one of the first paintings that I've just had up, and I work on it every once in a while, which I never really do. Because like I said, when I work on a painting, I kind of work on that until it's done, and then I walk away. So this has been kind of a nice, almost like a therapy piece for me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Going up and working on it a little bit, maybe changing something.
Yeah.
But anyway, ultimately, I decided to go back to this cooler palette. and decided on this blue background, which is, it's the same in every piece. And what I did, I actually, every artist that I chose, I scheduled a photo shoot with them at 12 noon. Every one of them was at 12 noon on different days, obviously, whenever they had time and it was convenient for them. But they came to my studio. I photographed them all in the same spot with the same light at 12 noon. And yeah, so it's literally just a very sort of, all the portraits have the same light, and it's a similar series body of work of all these 20 amazing artists.
Mm.
And what I was going to say is, when I chose these artists, there are some that are very well known, actually, like Sean Hall here. Sean Hall is a very amazing abstract painter, very famous down here in the South. But there were also artists in the series who are, really early on, kind of starting out and aren't so well known. So that was kind of the point, is I wanted to kind of showcase a diverse selection of these.
Yeah, the whole community.
Right.
I have to say, these portraits are really amazing because they're such a skillful blend of abstract qualities, expressionistic painting, and it's that kind of work when you get really close to it. It's paint on the surface and you can't even really tell what you're looking at when you get right up to it. And then you pull back, and I've seen two in real life, and I've seen a lot of others online. They are such amazing characterizations. You really feel the spirit, you really feel the presence of these people. And I'm just blown away that you can achieve that working so loosely.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it's literally kind of what I'm going for. And I'm not obviously I'm not there are a lot of artists that work this way, where I'm literally trying to put down as little information as possible to get an idea across.
Yeah.
So, there are a lot of artists that paint that way very loosely and but yeah, I enjoy painting that way, and it is nice to be able to see these pieces in person and get up close, because you really can't see in a photograph or online, obviously, kind of how loose things are, and even the texture too.
The texture is important.
Yeah, because I'm all about, like I said, with the different tools that I use, I'm all about a diversity of marks, because I think that makes the painting a lot more interesting, and your eye kind of flows through it.
It gives it life too. It gives it a liveliness that animates the character and makes the character feel almost real.
Yeah, and it's just more interesting for me. Yeah. And the different thickness, because there's some areas that are very thin, which are like that underpainting that is left behind, and then you get areas that are like really thick. So there's diversity in everything in the painting, or at least how I'm going for.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in and say what Aron is talking about specifically in the instance of these works, you can see in the painting that we have in our collection, Clifton Faust, because it's from this series. And so make a point to come to the museum and see the work and see how amazing it is in real life. So what comes next, Aron? What was next after this series?
The most recent show that I had, the most recent solo show, was at Lemieux Galleries here in New Orleans. And it just so happened that the opening for that show was in March. So we did have the opening, and then the city basically shut down the next week. So unfortunately, we had the opening, which was great, but the show didn't get a lot of foot traffic, obviously, because that's, COVID had set in, especially down here. We were a hot spot for a while. And,
yes.
Things shut down really quickly, but it was a landscape show. Pull this back. See these three pieces. So the point of this, let's see. So I did a residency in Ireland, an art residency. I was in Ireland for basically from November to December, right before Christmas. And my focus while I was there was the landscape. I was really interested in, especially Ireland, because Ireland is there's not a lot of trees. It's what I kind of think of as a very simplistic landscape. And I really wanted to like toy around with abstracting the landscape more and playing with some more abstract ideas. Obviously, my residency was actually supposed to be a lot earlier. I ended up going in November and December, and then my show was in March. So because this show was actually supposed to be a landscape show of Irish landscapes from that residency, but because my residency got pushed back so late, I ended up doing Louisiana landscapes. And again, I chose to focus mainly on southern Louisiana, down near, locals know the city Grand Isle, which is down on the Gulf Coast. But as you go down there around that area, it gets very flat. You've got, patches of land surrounded by a lot of water. And again, the idea was that for me, it's kind of a very simple landscape for me to play around with and abstract a little bit. So these three pieces are on wood, and not all of them were on wood. Some were on canvas, but I was also, because it was a landscape show, I really wanted to kind of push the panoramic version of the landscape.
Yeah.
So these two pieces are actually, they should be side to side. They're actually one long piece. Stacks just so that everyone can see it all, and I have the other pieces that I need to hang on the walls. But this is, I'll stand back here. Yeah, this actually goes next to it over here, so it's one really long panoramic piece.
Yeah, you can figure out how they connect.
Yeah, and because when you get down to southern Louisiana, it is just very, you can almost
Unobstructed views.
Just very flat. And it's
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's these marks that are kind of hard to see, but there was a lot of toying again with pulling paint from the sky into the landscape or the water, or vice versa, like really kind of breaking these planes and fragmenting things a little bit in this series. And these are okay examples. There were some other paintings in the series where I really exaggerated that quite a bit. You have a lot of marks that are just like the sky is just getting pulled right into the subject of the landscape. So, and there is also a lot of these unfinished windows again that I like to call them, of that underpainting. Because another thing that happened in this series was there was a lot of where I would paint something, and then I would let it dry and then paint something completely different on top, and like change what was there, and sometimes be like accept the change by either being happy with it or sometimes lamenting what I lost, but just kind of going forward and doing it in that kind of a style. The whole point of that was because the last couple of years, I actually went through some big changes in my life personally. So it was kind of this cathartic sort of style, and it was sort of therapeutic to me to be kind of deliberately changing the painting and kind of accepting, whatever happened, losing some things underneath, but only these little windows to get down to that initial sort of process where it began.
Now,
yeah, and the painting on the bottom is that was a huge storm that I got caught in Grand Isle.
Wow.
Yeah, it's called that. The title of that painting is called Grand Isle Tempest.
Beautiful.
Well, that's got to be quite frightening, being like out, what appears to be out in the middle of nowhere, no shelter, and then this storm comes in. That's a very effective piece. You have that feeling like,
Storms are no joke when you're down there, and there's
Yeah.
not a lot to hide behind. You're very exposed down there. Yeah.
So Aaron, when I look at the portraits and knowing that you're having to work wet on wet, are you working very quickly on these pieces? Because they have kind of a bit of a frenetic feel to them when you get up close with all the mark making. Are you working very quickly when you're doing these pieces?
Yeah, I do tend to paint fairly quickly. And again, it's kind of part of my style. Like it is very energetic. And I always have music playing when I'm painting, and the playlists that I have sort of shift from maybe a slower kind of mellow song, and then it might have a very energetic song, and it literally does go into the painting, depending on what I'm playing. Like sometimes I will get very energetic with my mark making and a little more gestural, and a little more confident about just kind of throwing things wherever. But yeah, it goes back to, like I said before, like spending a lot of time on a painting. I might start to second guess decisions. So there are several reasons why I paint that way. I mean, obviously it's that gestural style, which I like, and it's very spontaneous and it comes out in the work. But it is also, I don't want to get caught up in the details. I'm trying to avoid that.
Yeah.
And the longer I spend on the painting, it's inevitably going to go in that direction where I'm going to start to overwork an area.
Yeah.
So there is kind of a quicker tempo, I guess, or I try to keep it that way when I'm.
Yeah. And I would think that working wet into wet, you're setting up a restriction right there, because you can only go so far before you start muddying things up. So that must play a part in it as well.
Yeah, I just want to go a little closer so
nice.
See some of the marks a little more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. These would be nice to see. Hopefully you'll have an opportunity to show some of them again at a time when people can see them.
Yeah, because we really need to see them in person. It's just amazing.
We're getting sort of close to time. Aron, you said that you haven't been painting a lot lately, but you did tell us earlier that you had just completed a commission.
Yeah, so I've actually been doing quite a bit of commission work. So, because again, I came back from that Ireland residency, and so that actually is kind of the next body of work that I'm very excited to get into. I'm kind of going to continue this landscape strain and dive into all this Irish landscape material that I have, this reference material. So hopefully that's the next body of work when I can get to it. But I've been working on some commissions, and I just finished a commission of 3 paintings, 3 jazz musicians, Nina Simone, Louis Armstrong, and Ray Charles, for a private collector that lives in Mexico City. And so I haven't been painting a whole lot because lately I've been doing a lot of administrative things, and also working on building a box and getting things sorted out to ship these paintings to Mexico City. And I do have, if you want to see the painting.
Yeah, let's see one of those pieces.
Yeah, let's walk on over.
The box is here. This is my desk over here.
Oh, nice.
This is the Ray Charles painting.
Very nice. So what size is that approximately?
This is, I believe it's 30 inches by 36 inches.
30 by 36. Yeah. Nice.
This is my box. There's a hard foam box actually inside this cardboard box. And then I've got this polyethylene that the paintings fit inside snugly, all into there.
Yeah.
Oh, that should work out perfectly.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah. So are there any questions from our viewers, David?
We've got a question that came in while you were talking about your time in Ireland and your time painting down in southern Louisiana. Do you have like a sort of dream spot that you want to go to paint landscape wise, like any locale?
Yeah, I mean, Ireland was kind of it. That was an amazing. I can't speak enough about it. That was an amazing residency. It was a very. I was down on the southwesternmost tip of Ireland, down in County Kerry. Ballinskelligs was the closest little town, and very remote, very isolated, which was exactly what I wanted, exactly what I needed. And I did have a car. I thought about like only using a bike to get around, which thank God I didn't go through with that because I was there in the winter.
Oh yeah.
There was a lot of rain, so
Yeah.
and it was cold, so
Yeah.
that would have been pretty horrible. But yeah, I had a car and I went around all over that whole area and just took so many photographs and did some sketches. I didn't bring any oil paints, but I brought a watercolor setup. So I did some watercolors from life. I did a lot of charcoal drawings. And yeah, like I said, I'm really looking forward to getting into that material with some large studio paintings.
So you think that will be the subject of your next show at Lemieux Gallery?
I think it probably will.
Yeah.
Mainly just because I spent so much time researching that, because that's usually what happens for artists, and artists know this. But when you do a show, I mean, it is a big body of work, and there is usually a lot of research that goes into what that's going to be. Unless you're doing a show of like old paintings, if you're doing a new body of work, there usually is some sort of overall theme.
Yeah.
There's usually a lot of research that goes into that,
Yeah.
So yeah, this is kind of, it's almost like these Louisiana landscapes, because I really wanted to do the Irish landscapes for my show initially. So this was kind of a nice sort of test run.
Yeah.
I mean, doing this body of work really gave me a lot of ideas in the process of now how I want to move into the Irish material, those landscapes.
Yeah.
So,
is there a show scheduled, or is it still up in the air with COVID? And
I believe, let's see, this was March of 2020. So my next show would be right around the end of 2021, beginning of 2022.
Okay.
I don't know exactly, and it has been scheduled, and I just can't remember, but it's right around there because we have a solo show every 2 years.
Right.
So
well, that's definitely going to be something to look forward to. I think we will all kind of follow that and see exactly when that show is going to happen at Lemieux Gallery in New Orleans. Aron, we're just about out of time. I want to thank you so much. This was very insightful and really interesting. You have a really diverse range of skills. I don't know a lot of painters who can capture the landscape and portraits so well at the same time. So I also want to thank everybody who signed up for this session today. We had about 20 to 25 participants, and I want to let everybody know that we will do another virtual studio visit on November 13th with painter Gayla Irwin. She lives and works in Louisville, Kentucky, and her self-portrait as Saint Poulette will be part of what she talks about. It is in the collection of the Huntsville Museum of Art, and it is featured currently in the About Face exhibition. So you can sign up for that session now by visiting the website of the museum at www.hsvmuseum.org. And finally, just again, come and see the About Face exhibition at the Huntsville Museum of Art. It's a really interesting show. There's historical work as well as contemporary work, very different stylistic pieces, and there's a really compelling dialogue that results from having them all displayed in 2 galleries. Again, thank you all for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Aron.
Bye-bye.